Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? This is Curtis Pope, and we are about to begin in just one moment. Let me get all my stuff together, and we'll begin our cast in just a moment. Well, let's see. Hold on. Hope you guys don't mind that I'm singing while I set this all up. The Warriors game is going on in the background. Okay, let's see what we have going on, who's watching. I don't see anybody. Okay, let's see. Don't see anybody yet. So I'll give it another minute or so. Put this window right over here. What we have on, who's watching. I don't see anybody. Zero watching right now. Okay, let's see. Unless my wife in the background, she's listening to or watching the Warriors game. Looks like the Warriors are coming back. So we'll wait until we get a few more people to just kind of even this out. Unless my wife in the background, she's. Let's see who is actually watching. There should be a little chat window over to your left, I believe, and that is where you'll communicate with me. So if you have any questions or if you're having trouble connecting or whatnot, or you can't hear, just go ahead and use the chat module over here, and I can speak directly with you. So I'm excited. So give me 1 second. I'm still making sure that all systems are go, and making sure that everyone can see and hear. I had one person drop off, so at this one person on. You have to excuse me. This is my first time live streaming over YouTube to get all this modern day wizardry to work. So as I put in the invitation, this is strictly really it's more of an open concept right now. This is for my next project, my next mobile project. I wanted to actually make it a little bit more collaborative, for less than a proper term. The biggest thing is I wanted to have people actually watch as I code this new app, because I wanted to make sure that everyone can kind of see what the process is, and take away the gun shy nature of making apps or even building projects and launching a company. So this is exactly what this project is. And for now, we'll just kind of hold off. We'll wait for a few more people to join the session. I only see a few folks here. I see one person. And if you're in, why don't you go ahead and put your name in the chat window? Only I can see it. You can send it directly to me. I want to make sure that you get our healthy no prize for this evening. That way I can make sure who's a true believer here. Give me one moment. Also, if you're having any issues or concerns about making this happen, okay. If you can't see the screen very well, also please let me know. I'm looking at the resolution. We're saying YouTube has a very specific resolution, which is 1137, 1136 by 710. Let me make sure I have that really quickly. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll just begin. So without further ado, pardon me, that was me messing around here. Without further ado, I'm going to just go ahead and begin. So the name of the project that I'm building is called LineSnake. And the problem that it solves is actually if you've ever been to a comic book convention or any kind of convention where you have to wait in line for something or you're trying to get the autograph of your favorite author or your favorite artist, one of the painful things is if this is a big con, like let's say it's San Diego Comic Con or something like that, you're always stuck in line trying to figure out, where you made a wrong turn in your life instead of actually enjoying the con and interfacing with people, meeting other comic book creators and whatnot. And so, what LineSnake actually does is it helps the um, the con goer enjoy the actual comic book con. So, this app essentially is a ticketing system for lines. And let me just give a quick overview of what we're going to be covering tonight. So, before anything, I wanted to make sure that everybody had a clear understanding of tonight's agenda. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Uh, I'll have to make this bigger later. But essentially, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to just review the concept of LineSnake, kind of the origin, the genesis of this thing, and also get into our second bullet point is we want to review the sketch file or the wireframe for this app and really dig into what the core functionality is and talk about what we're going to build tonight. The third bullet point that I want to talk about tonight is we're just going to review some classes. Now, if you're not familiar with programming, classes are essentially the structure of an application. They are the things that define things. So imagine what's always used is the class of a car. So imagine you have the class named car. Car is um, it's really just an object if you think about it. Now it could be a red car, a blue car, it can be a green car as well. All of these things are more descriptors or properties of that car. So what we do is we create classes to define what objects we're going to use inside of our application. The kind of middle and the midway point, I hope that this session doesn't last too long. I'm trying to keep it under an hour. So I want to include some Q&A for all those folks that are out there and that are watching as I'm building this thing in real time. I'm kind of building the plane while flying it. Um, any questions that you may have. So feel free to use on YouTube. They have this chat window here. And if you have any questions, any kind of feedback, if you think what I'm building sucks, go ahead and put it in the chat. It's okay. This is an open forum. I don't expect everyone to love it. It's for a very specific audience. And those are people that are aspiring entrepreneurs, people that want to start building things, and people that are a little curious about what it goes into building an app. The fourth bullet point, if we can get to it, is of course we will be able to get to it. Is we're going to start coding the first view of the app. We're going to start coding the very nucleus of what this app does, which is essentially a screen where it lists out all the different lines that I can subscribe to. So the fifth bullet point is, of course, we're going to build this thing and we're going to test the daylights out of it. Just going to do some basic testing today, just for the sake of time, and get some of the core functionality knocked out so that the next session that we have, we can start really kind of tweaking this thing and making it what we want it to be. So, thank you guys for coming. Thank you for being online, being present at 7 p.m. I know it's hard. The Warriors are playing. Roots is about to be on in 2 hours. So, there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's go ahead and we will start getting into it. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the things that I already kind of have an idea of, the things that are already kind of pre-made. And so I want to take you inside my process a little bit. I'm going to show you some sketches from my sketchbook. And I'll just show you so that you know exactly what goes into my process for creating an app. So one of the first things that I do is I have a notebook in which I really kind of get down to what the core functionality of the app is. And this was the first thing that I did. You can see the date from the top. It was on May 20th, 2016. And I have a very simple description and some kind of initial thoughts about what this thing is going to be. And it's called LineSnake. That is the name of the app that we're going to be building. Now, LineSnake helps you reserve your spot in line so you can enjoy the rest of the con. That's as simple. That is as simple as you can make it. So that is the premise of the app. The next thing I started doing was I started making these little thumbnail sketches down here. What you can see is I have kind of a welcome screen. Then I start kind of hashing in what do they need to be able to do. They need to be able to select a location. Then they need to be able to select a line, and then they need to be able to subscribe to that line or get in line, so to speak, and then confirmation thing. So also on the back end of that, they also need to be getting alerted as to when their particular spot in line is open and up. So those are things that we'll talk about later and we'll get into. We're going to start with the simple things, which is actually building the app to where a person can get a ticket into the session. So let's talk about some other things. So that wasn't where I stopped. I, had some rough preliminary drafts. As you can see in my first sketch, I had kind of a X marks the spot little dashed logo that kind of starts off being a little line, but it ends up in an X, kind of like a treasure map or something like that. But I was never really satisfied with that, and that's the cool thing about having a sketchbook is that you can really note down your ideas without getting bogged down with the details. And it will come to you eventually. Eventually, it did come to me. Now, what I have here in this next sketch is I actually start roughing in some basic ideas. In fact, this little dashed line was where I started. I said, here's where you start, which is a little sign that says end of line, and then here's where I want to end up with that little dot here. Let me blow this up a little so that folks at home can see. And I start doing some other rough sketches, and I say, okay, I want this thing to kind of look like a snake, but then I don't want to make it. I think it's what anthropomorphic or whatever. I don't want to make it skeuomorphic. That is, I don't want to make it where it's like so literal. People are like, why do I have a snake app? Is this about snakes or whatnot? I wanted to kind of convey what this app was about without getting bogged down with silly stuff. So I started making a couple little iterations and whatnot, played around with the design a little. As you can see, I started kind of going with the strong L inside the top of the S, and then the rest of the S was made up of just nothing really. But I thought it was kind of a play on the logo, so that you have L and you have S that makes the whole thing up. And it kind of looks like a snake a little bit, the way that it's sitting up, and then here's the head of it. It doesn't have to be super detailed in order for you to get the concept, but it gave me a great idea as to how to proceed, and that's all really me sketching these things out helped me to do. The next thing that I did was I started kind of thinking about, I did some line studies here where I said, well, how do I want to convey when a line is almost full or when things are about to fill up. If Stephen King is doing a book signing, you want to make sure that you hit it at the right time and you get in line at the right time. So these are things that I may or may not use. There's nothing that's written in stone here, okay? The other thing that I did was I started to make up my objects, which I knew in this app there was only going to be a few objects. There was going to be the user, which is the congoer, the person that's actually going to the convention, and that person, or excuse me, the person that's organizing the event, they would essentially be the ones that own the event. So if I'm throwing a party or any kind of event, a Comic Con or whatnot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, here's my event. Then I'm going to invite others to make lines within that event so that they can basically have their own queue or their own line of people that want to line up for sketches. So it works efficiently that way in theory. But as we build this thing, we're going to come to the conclusion that some of the ideas that I had sketched out may or may not work for this project. So that's the part where a lot of this is discovery, and as you build on what you thought in the beginning may not be the true concept in the end. And that's part of app making in general, or making anything. You may have a great grandiose idea, but in the end, it all depends on how the person uses it and how you feel when you use it, because that will tell you a lot of things. So without further ado, there's another little sketch that I had, which starts to kind of rough in how I want the interface to look. I wanted a nice search bar at the top, and then I wanted to have these details like, Rob Liefeld draws, and then I put 30% full, and then plenty of room left, and then opens in 30 minutes. Like these kind of calls to action, so that when users see these lines, they're motivated to really get in and say, oh, that guy is signing, or that guy has an autograph line or a sketch line opening up. I better go in and do this right away. So, so that was kind of the genesis of it. And so what I did was I wanted to start taking this out of the physical so much, my sketchbook, and started to rough in some of these things inside of Sketch, which is an app that I use for prototyping. And a lot of organizations use this app primarily to just start getting a proof of concept out there, or visual proof of concept for the app that they want to build. So I highly recommend it. I've been using it for the past year almost. I've completely moved away from Photoshop because I think Sketch translates everything that I want to build properly into my iOS development phase. So as you can see, this is actually what we're going to build today. We're going to build these little pieces of data here. You see where, if you think of this as one object here, or one block, let me select it. All these things we selected, this is what our aim to build tonight is, okay? So I don't want you to be fearful of how big this project or the scope or whatnot, because we're going to start out with little bits, and then I'm not going to leave you hanging. We're just going to build this thing very simply. And without further ado, let's see what else we have on the agenda. So we've reviewed the sketch file, the wireframe, and then so now what we need to do is actually talk about some of the classes. Remember, I talked a little bit about what classes are. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now, just so that we know exactly what we can expect in building this app. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. So I have an Excel spreadsheet. This is oftentimes how I make a lot of my classes. I have a little code generator that I wrote that essentially will generate a class for me. As I said earlier, we have a user object, which basically includes the name, their email address, and their user ID, which is a generated integer or a number. Then we have an email address, which essentially lets us know their email address, no big deal. And then we have the name, and that is essentially it. So then we scroll up, and we have an event object. And these are all the little bits of information we need to collect in order to have a proper event. I need to know the name, the description, the address, the city, state, zip. I need to know when it starts. I need to know the time it starts. I need to know the time it ends. I need to know if it's active or not. I need to know which user ID or which user created this event. I need to know what organization this event belongs to. I need to know when this event ends as well. And I need to give it a proper event ID as well. Okay. Then I have the actual golden class that we're going to be dealing with a lot tonight, which is our line. Now, our line object is really the fulcrum of what we need to create here, because it's our most important class. So it's important that we get this right. So in our line class, we have the following bits of information, or properties that belong to this class. The first one is going to be the line title. So in our case here, we're going to use here, let me double this up with my sketch file. And we can kind of start to draw parallels to what we're creating versus what will be the visual elements. So the line title is equivalent to this part that says Jim Lee is signing, Rob Liefeld is signing, Eric Larson is signing, Arthur Adams is signing, and then this is a full event, San Diego Comic Con. Okay. Then the description is something that is actually right here below, right? So we can have all of these things kind of fill in, like, Jim Lee is signing. You need to get there fast. Here's the date and the time. Here's the extra information that goes into this particular signing. We have what time it opens, what time it closes. We have a proper line ID. We have an organization ID, which links back to the event, which links back to the user. All of these things are what they call relational. So everything kind of ties into the other objects that it uses or that it's paired with. Okay. Then we have a couple other important information, pieces of information. We have an event ID, we have a line cap number, okay? So what that is it's a number where you can say, you know what, Jim Lee is signing, he's having a comic book signing, but he only wants to allow 30 people to do this, okay? Or 30 people to sign up. So you can cap the line at 30 people, and that's essentially it. Then the next variable here is the line capped? It's a Boolean value, so it's either true or false. In this case, it would be true. And then also we have another piece of another column here that will hold the number of current people that are um, subscribed to that line. So I think this kind of sums it up for a review of classes. So let's get into the Q and A. Okay, so you guys do the Q, and I will be doing the A. So over in the session itself, on YouTube, you can see exactly where we are. Uh, Let me go into YouTube now, and then we will know exactly what our questions are. If you have a question, please use the chat version at the bottom, or the chat function there. I don't know why I'm saying version. Let me see something really quickly. I am confused as to where my chat button is here so that I can talk to you folks. But if you do have questions, feel free to use here, let me try mine. Go ahead and ask questions. So if you saw that, it will show you exactly where to add your chat question. And I will answer it live on the air as much as possible. Pardon me. Get some oddball questions. I'm not sure if this is a legit question. Maybe it is. Okay, I'm not going to answer that question, but anyway, what we can do here is we'll just go ahead and skip. It doesn't look like anyone has any questions, so we'll skip that and we'll get right into the coding now, okay? So let's see. So we're already about 25 minutes in. I only want to go a few more minutes, maybe another 20 minutes or so. So I don't want to tie everyone up. But I think you guys are going to like what we have to create. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we are going to create a new project. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to open up an app called Xcode, which is actually the app that every iOS developer uses. So let's do this. Let me let me create a new one. Okay. You can see what I'm doing off screen, but I'm closing my previous project. So I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to move it over here so that everyone can see exactly what we're doing. Make this a little bit bigger. So when I do File New, what I'm doing is I do File New Project, and then it opens me up this window, and I can make the choice here to make a single view application, which is really, it allows us a lot of flexibility when building this app. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new single view application. I'm going to call it LineSnake, and it's under all my organization and identifier name. So we're going to keep it like that. I'm going to hit next. It's only going to be for iPhone. We're not going to make it for iPad. It's kind of, it'd be kind of a weird experience. We want this experience to really fit into people's pockets. So we're not going to go with creating an iPad app or a universal app for both. And I don't really see much of a demand. So we're going to create it under my contract work folder. Go ahead and create that. And this is going to go ahead and open. And right away we have a number of different objects that Xcode has already created for us. They have a main storyboard, which I'll take you guys through really briefly. Our main storyboard essentially holds the visual elements of our app. In a big company, like if you were to build an app for a big company, you would almost never touch this main.storyboard because what I found is a lot of, for Xcode doesn't really work well in this environment for teams, people that work on the same bits of code together. It's not as a collaborative tool as people would want. But there are advantages in us doing it this way because we'll be able to use the GUI fully or the user interface fully to add objects and to do the things that we want to do. So you can get a bit more visual in the definition of our app, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data retrieval class, okay? And what that is I'm going to create a new group, first of all, and I'm going to call it classes. And I'm going to create another group, and that one's going to be called resources. And oh, looks like the Warriors are doing pretty good again. So classes, and I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to add a new file in there, and we get the same prompt as before, with the exception of, let me move this here so that we can all see. That might be helpful. That's my wife. She loves the Warriors. So let me move this over here. So that we can get a full visual representation. And in fact, I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller. In fact, I'm going to move my face down here. That way I don't have to worry about moving things too much while we code. Okay? So now that I have it all arranged the way that I want, I'm going to go ahead and create in iOS, we're going to create a Cocoa Touch class. Okay? And we're going to call this data retrieval. Okay? And it's a subclass of NS object, which is really a base object for, or base class for anything that you create in iOS or even Cocoa. So we're going to use that for now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit next. It's going to ask me where do I want to create this thing. I went ahead and created it. And we'll dive right in. So as you can see, there's really nothing in here. There's almost nothing. It's just a descriptor of the class and then what type of object it's subclassing from. So that's of course not very fun. And what we're going to do is we're going to liven it up a little. We're going to add a few things here, okay? the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our class. We're going to add our class for, we're going to add our three classes, okay, for our line, our event, and our user, okay? So let's do this. Let's make some comments. And the way I make comments is just //. I'm going to create my user here, and then I'm going to create my event here, and then I'm going to create my line here, okay? So now I'm going to go back to my Excel spreadsheet, and since, like I told you, I have a little class generator here that essentially will give me everything that I need. So I'm going to copy those values in there. Oh, pardon me, I made a big boo-boo here. I'm going to name it first. So the same way that we have class data retrieval and the object it subclasses, we're not subclassing these particular classes. We're creating them from whole cloth. So we're going to go ahead and hit class, and here we're just going to call this user or ls user. It's not going to be a subclass of anything, but we're going to add our properties right in there. Oh, only one time though. So this is a very simple class. It's a class called LSUser, and it has three variables: LS name, LS email address, and LS user ID. All of these things are going to help us to identify this class, and we're going to add these little pieces of data in order to create the full class, okay? We're going to add a name to it. We're going to add an email address to it. We're going to add a user ID to it in order to make this one class, okay? I know this may be hard to follow at this point, but we're doing it. Hold on one second. Let's stop and see what the Warriors are doing really briefly. This is doing pretty good. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our class for events, and we're going to go class, and I'm going to create event, and here's where we're going to stick in our variables. And while we're at it, since we're still here, we're just going to go ahead and do the same thing for our line object. Okay, we're going to class, and it's going to be called line, and then we'll put our variables in there once we copy them out of Excel. We'll go back here in Excel, copy all the generated variables here, copy them, and that was event. So we're going to go copy that. And as you can see, no big errors, no problems. It all copied fine. So we're going to be able to use these classes later on. In fact, not that far from now. So let's go ahead and copy everything that we have in. And I think we're good to go. So now we have three fully working classes. We have LS user, we have the event, and then we have line. Okay. So now let's talk about data retrieval. Okay. So to save a lot of time and not a lot of fuss, I'm going to go ahead and just copy in a few functions, a few things that I've created that will actually help us to get up and running a little bit faster. And the reason for me copying and pasting this isn't because I created this before. It's just because a lot of this stuff, I don't want to make it boring for all you folks that are at home and they're interested in this. I don't want to make it overly technical because really the gist of what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a product. And by hook or by crook, there's just so many different moving parts. And I don't want you to get bogged down by that. I want you to actually have fun. I want you to watch what I'm doing and just pay attention. If you have questions, if you want to know more, I'm always here to answer questions and give answers. So let's copy these four functions that I created earlier today. that fully utilize this, and then we'll kind of talk about them a little, okay? So let me copy these, and we'll go down to our data retrieval class, okay? So in here, data retrieval has nothing in it right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste what I have, and we'll go back to the beginning of data retrieval, okay? So let's focus only on these things. So data retrieval, I have a couple different things here, okay? So first of all, data retrieval has one variable, which is line array right now, okay? So what that is that is an array or a collection of different lines, essentially. I can put a line for Jim Lee, a line for Rob Liefeld, a line for Stephen King, a line for any artist or any personality. I can put all those things in one collection. So if you think of it as a bookshelf, right? It is really just a collection on a bookshelf. It creates the entire bookend, okay? So nothing to really get scared of, because what we're going to do is we're going to put all of our lines into that line array. The line array is going to be our best friend, and it's a type that is called NS mutable array, which means that we can change the values, we can update it, we can do a lot of different things to that array. So let's not get bogged down by that. I'm creating that strictly for us to use. And there's a couple functions here. So the first one, let me minimize these. That way the lines don't get super confusing. Let's go back to search lines and events. And so I have a couple functions here. I say get line by ID. I have get all lines for an event, and then I pass in the event ID. And then I have search lines and events, which allows me to search lines and events for a particular string. So if I'm looking for Jim Lee convention or whatever, I can do that and search for it and bring back results that will show me all these things. The other thing that I have is get all lines, which is what we're going to be using today, because I'd rather not slice and dice this too much. I'd rather just have one pristine function that returns all the lines. And as we get deeper and deeper into our app, we're going to be dealing a lot with how to slice and dice these things, how to bring in the specific piece of data that we want. So let's focus on just getting the data in there first, okay? And as you can see, what I've done is beforehand, I've created a line object, okay? So we're in the get all lines function, okay? So I'm going to comment that by saying create a line object, okay? That's my first thing I need to do. Then I need to add values to the properties in that object. Okay, so you can see I have a line title, I have a line description, I have whether the line is capped or not, which is a true or false. I have a line cap number, which is 30, so I only want 30 people on this line. And then I'm fudging the data, I'm making the data up. So I put in the line cap number currently, or the, actually this should be line cap current number. Caught myself there. So line cap current number, which is 10. So that is the amount of people that are in that line currently. And the reason I'm fudging this data right now is so that we can get a live working version up before we have to build the back end. The back end is essentially the database, all the data and doing all that stuff. I don't want to make that quite yet. I want to play with loose data that I can change on the fly and that I can manipulate very easily without having to build my back end or change things on my back end. So in a way, we're proving the concept before we build the back end. Now, if you're working in a big company, they will tell you to build the back end first because we have time and resources to do so. Now, when you're building for yourself, you're not going to always be pressed to do that, because what you've got to do is get a proof of concept up to show others, to show developers or other folks that you work with, and also to show VCs or people that you're getting money from as well. So you need to be able to prove the concept and work with some nice, fresh data. So once we've actually added all those components, Then I want to add another comment here, which is add the object. Oh, actually, we'll put add the line to the array. Okay, and so this is signified by this line here, line array, which is the array that we defined very early, that it can be used by any one of these functions. I'm saying add an object, and I want you to add this line 1 object that we just filled up with data. And then once I'm done with that, this function in itself, this function, let me separate this a little bit so that you can see. This function called getAllLines, it's going to return that NS mutable array, which is our line array. So at the end of it, it's going to say return the line array that we just filled up with data. And then from there, our app is able to utilize this and really get on the road. So now let's move over into the UI. Let's get creative with what we're doing. And let's look at the UI, and we'll start wiring up this simple one line into our UI, okay? Let me just switch my screen around just a tad. So if you remember, let me close this because that's an older project. Actually, you know what? I'm not gonna hide anything from you guys. I'm going to show you what an app in a large company or small company. This is actually another app that I'm working on called Toro, and this is it's actually an enterprise product that I've been working on for about a month or so. But what this is essentially how things are mocked up. Let me zoom in a little bit. So what you can see is what I've done is I've mocked up every single screen that I have inside this app. Okay. Let me move out a little bit so you can see. So I've mocked up every single screen that I'm going to use, and I even have a screen here that is welcome A and welcome B. And these are both screens that will help me kind of decide which things are UI, UX effective. And then I've went ahead and mocked up every single screen, and I've used different components to kind of really, and you'll see in red text, I've kind of really thought about this a lot, and so I'm putting this out there so that I can remember. And if I work with other developers or even hire other developers, which sometimes I do, but not really, then they'll be able to know the same thing that's on my mind and go from there. I see that WV Watson wants me to make the text a little bit bigger, so that's what I'm going to do. Let's go back into our Xcode here, and let me just show you guys how to do that, just in case you're following along. So I have I have a, I have a presentation. I have a set of, I guess, variables, or not variables, but I have a font and color set that essentially lets me modify this thing on the fly. So what I'm going to do is, I did make the text a little bit bigger. I hope WV Watson enjoys that. So give me a second. Let me just put that I've increased the size. Okay. So as you can see, the size is a little bit bigger. And this is really, so to go back and for those folks that the text wasn't as big for you folks, what we're going to do is the only thing that we really care about is this particular function that returns back an array of lines, okay? And in that array of lines, all we're doing is we're manually adding one particular line, and that is the Jim Lee signing, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over into our UI in our main.storyboard, and what we're going to do is we're going to close that because we want to open it up inside the window here. And I hope this is big enough for all you guys to see. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe. think that's about as big as I can make it here. But hmm, strange that I can't make it bigger now. Well, I'm on my Thunderbolt display. I have two Thunderbolt displays, so it's probably thinking, well, you got too big of a screen. So let's dig our heels into creating the UI, what this thing's going to look like, okay? Because, no matter how much code wizardry you have behind the scenes, if your app doesn't look right, then it's not going to look right to anyone, whether it be the end user or just people that want to give you guys a look or find out what you're doing. Once again, I have a very simple UI here, and that is on purpose because there's so much information I could jam into this little space, but you have to think about your end user. Do they really care? Are they really prone to get in here and really focus on these little details? Mm, it just really depends. So I want to make it as glanceable as possible. That's kind of a little word I use. I want to make it to where if I'm looking at this just at a glance, I can really get the sense of what's going on inside of this app. So this is the little pieces that we're going to be creating today. But first, let's make sure that we have everything that we need fully wired up, okay? Let's do this. We'll go back to Xcode. And what we're going to do here is we're going to turn on the code editor as well, because we not only just want to see visually what this thing is going to look like, but we also want to make sure that everything that we're putting into this thing is going to look tip-top. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select this screen that we have or this view that we have, and I'm going to delete it, okay? Now you have nothing. Don't get scared, okay? Because what we're going to do here is, once again, the reason we started a project like this is so that we can. Let me bring you back to where you can actually see me. Let me bring this up. Sorry. That's the point. I'm trying to move in front of this thing. So give me one moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag in. This will actually be the quickest part, and you'll just be so amazed in just a moment. What we're going to do is we're going to drag this thing called a table view controller from our components menu here. We're going to drag that into our main.storyboard, okay? And when we do that, you'll see that a couple things happen. So first, you'll see our code editor window starts to fill up. That's okay. Don't get intimidated by that. What we're going to do is this will be our first view. So when the app opens up, we want this thing to be the first view that it hits, okay? So we're going to go over into what's called our inspector over here, and we're going to mark this as our initial view. There's a little deal under here that says this is our initial view, and that's what we're going to be committed to, our initial view, okay? So before we move on into our code, we're going to do a few things. First thing is there's a little thing in here that you may not notice when you drag it in, but it's called a UI table view cell, and we're going to select that cell, okay? Just make sure we select it, and then over in our inspector, way over here on the right, if you don't have it up, there's a little key here that, or a little button here that will basically let it be seen. So we're going to name that cell using our identifier. We're going to just name it cell, and that's just to keep it simple for our study we're doing today. Okay, so we're going to back over here into our cell, and one thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to our, our LineSnake folder. We're going to add a new file, or you can just go to File New, and it's going to be a Cocoa Touch class, and we're going to hit Next. And before we enter anything as the class, we're going to just, in our dropdown, we're going to enter UI, in our subclass of, we're going to do UI Table View Controller, because we have what's called a table view here, which will iterate every single object we define, and then we'll basically create a long table of what we need to use or what we need to see on the screen. And so we're going to name that UITVC underscore, pardon me, caps are on, UITVC underscore, and we'll name this lines. And we don't need to create a zip file for it. But if you were at a big team, you would create a zip file for it, and they would love you forever because that's how teams operate. Oftentimes, when you're in a big team, they want to have you use zip files instead of the storyboard that we're using today. But since we're only pleasing ourselves, we're only going to do that. Okay, we're going to hit next, UITVC lines, and it's going to ask me where we want to save it. Go ahead and create it right where it lays, and that's cool. So then it opens right up, and it has a number of different code lines in it. Don't get intimidated by that. We're going to go right back here using our little arrow right here, and or you can select main storyboard. And what we're going to do here, there's a little yellow symbol here, which is basically our class that defines this table view. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wire it up to the table view or the UI table view controller I just created. So I'm going to UITVC underscore lines, and that tells this view that hey, there's a set of code, or there's essentially a code file that will define what is going to be in this thing. Okay, and that's called UITVC lines. So let's go all the way to the top of UITVC lines. So there's a couple things that we can do here, okay, with UITVC lines. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to add some variables or properties to UITVC lines, okay? The first one is going to be called final lines array, okay? That's what it's going to be called. I should have commented this instead. Now I'm going to put var, which defines it as a variable, final lines array, okay? And it's going to be equal to an ns mutable array, okay? And the next variable that we're going to add is going to be called number of rows. And what that is essentially it is I'm going to make that 0 first of all. And what that is it's going to tell the table view here how many lines or how many different lines we have that it needs to create. Because the reason there's only one table view controller here is because it duplicates this or dequeues this table view cell here in order to make it just the way that it is for every single object that we have, or every single line that we have in our case. So right when this thing, so those are the only two things that we're going to define in this class. The other thing that we're going to do is this. So there's a function called viewDidLoad, and what this does is it basically runs whatever in this space right when the view loads, okay? In our case, what we wanted to do is we wanted to look over in our data retrieval class, which is in our class file, and we wanted to bring over all the lines that we have, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to define this again. We're going to say var, and we're just going to name it dr, and it's going to equal data retrieval. We got a message or someone. It's all good. So it's going to be data retrieval, which is the class that we want to use. Okay. Actually, we should just make this a let, because we don't need to do anything to it afterwards except call a particular function. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, okay, now that we have that dr, let's now fill our final lines array with what's in that dr. We're going to say, okay, now our final lines array is equal to our dr dot get get all lines. Okay, so right there I'm saying, okay, give me the object called dr, and then I want you to fill it with all the lines that are inside of the database. Okay, and remember, the only line that we have right now is that Jim Lee signing. Okay, so that means we want to have one. We're going to have one line when this is returned. Okay, so once that is all done, and then I'm going to say, okay, now I want to fill this number of rows with however many final lines array or whatever is in this final lines array. I'm going to say, how many lines are in this final lines array? Well, I'm going to say number of rows equals final lines array dot count. Okay? So it's done the count. So both of these will be filled at this point. Okay? So that basically, once this app loads, then it starts to fill in the blanks, so to speak. But then there's some more things that we need to do. We need to tell the table view certain things. We need to tell it how many sections does the table view have. We need to tell it how many objects does it have. And we need to know what do we need to do if we do have an object here. What do we need to do if we have a line? So right down below, you'll see that all of these methods or these functions are generated for you. In fact, there's one extra one that I almost never use, but it can be used if you define your data by sections, which we may at one point. But we'll leave that commented out now, okay? And we're just going to focus on this, which is the number of rows in section. Now, if we comment this out, by default, the table view thinks that there's only one section. So that's fine. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to tell the table view how many rows it has. And so we're going to return the number of rows. Very simple. And then so there's one more thing that we need to do. So there is a commented out section here because it is something that you only use optionally, but for every table view you want to use it, or you want to at least kind of hint to it, or you want to know how to use it rather. And what this is essentially, this is the cell for row at index path. So to explain what this does is it basically is a function that says I have 17 lines or 17 rows of things. What do I need to do in the case of every single one of those? Do I need to just let this lay as it is, or do I need to do something special to it? Well, that's where you define it right here at this cell for row at index. So what we're going to do is, since we've uncommented all the text here, what we're going to do is we're just going to fill in the blank with what we named our table view cell here, which is cell. So if you remember when we set this up, all we did was we defined it using cell. Am I selecting the right thing? Here we go. Cell, and that's the identifier. So we're going to go ahead and type in, not here. We're going to say, hey, if there's any objects here with the name cell, here's what we're going to do. Didn't go right. Make sure we're double quoted because it is a string. And then right here, there's a little comment there that makes it all ready for us that says configure the cell now. So now what we're going to do is now we're going to tap into where our lines are and start bringing those things into our UI, okay? So here's where kind of the magic happens here. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in this. We're going to create a variable, or actually we're going to say, okay, we're going to say, okay, let's create a variable for the current line. Let current, excuse me, I don't learn how to read. Current line equal, what did we name our final lines array? There we go. Equals final lines array dot object at index, and we're going to use the index path dot row, and we're going to define it as a line, okay? And we're going to say this is our current line. So if I tap into, it's actually capital P, index path.row, and I can basically say, okay, my current line is whatever it is at this index path. So it can be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I know I'm not explaining that in depth, but trust me, it'll start to make sense once we see the app build. So now we have a current line. And then now let's fill up this table view cell. You may not see it here, but there's actually a couple hidden things here once you instantiate a UI table view cell. And one of them is the text label. And we're going to go ahead and fill that up with the actual title from the line. Okay, so we're going to say cell, which is the object we're going to deal with here, text label dot text equals current line dot ls underscore event, or excuse me, line title, I believe. Yep, line title. And that, let's put a nice exclamation point there just because we want to make sure it's definitely there. And then what we're going to do is it will return that cell once it's done. So now comes the moment of truth. Now we'll put this thing to the test, see if it works. And inside of Xcode, if you're familiar, there is an iPhone 6s with our name on it. So we'll go ahead and test that using that. And this should build properly. In fact, I'm pretty confident because I actually wrote a lot of this code earlier just in preparation for doing this today. And so it should, oh, there's one thing that we did forget. Pardon me. I always need to make sure. Okay, we do have it, so I'm not really worried about it. Pardon me. Yeah, stop the build. Okay, so now let's switch to our iOS simulator. Let me drag that into view so you can all see. And you can see a ton of apps that I've done that really help to define, a lot of the work that I've been doing for a long time. Does anyone have any questions while we're waiting for this to build? It shouldn't take this long, though. Okay, did something. Ah, I have another project open, pardon me. Yeah, I have a bunch of other stuff running. Oh, it's my live stream. That's why it's eating up all my memory. Actually, we'll just keep letting it go because that way we'll see it very soon, the way that it's building. So it takes a little bit longer because of our live stream. And I have the max amount of memory in a MacBook Pro, so uh, it's uncanny how much memory this eats up. But this is a very simple app, so we'll just look at the results and see what those are in just a moment. In the meantime, let's go ahead and go over to questions. WV Watson, I see a couple other people watching now. Do you guys have any questions or are there any concerns? Ah, so we see LineSnake now, actually, right over here in our app. And we should start to see let's turn on let's make sure we're not in error of anything here. Let me move this here. Hmm. Very strange. Well, we should be seeing very shortly. We should be seeing a couple things. Most importantly, we should actually be seeing our app here launch with. Here, let's do this. Let's kill this. Kill this. Kill this. It goes to show you how much stuff I make. Anyway, so since I built this earlier, I'm going to do it kind of like they do on Food Network here. And I'm going to take my pre-made one out of the oven and show it to you. Just because we're kind of strapped for memory, it looks like, and I don't know why. So what we have here, huh, very odd. I'm going to quit my iOS simulator at this point. And let me go for a iPhone 6 here, since that was what I tested on previously and I didn't have any issues. So let's give that a shot. And of course, fails in public here, so we'll be okay. And while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the recent pre-LineSnake that I did earlier today, just so that we can kind of see what this thing is supposed to look like and feel like. I'm not quite sure why we have so many memory issues at this point other than the live stream. I'm not sure if that's a factor in it or whatnot, but I can show that to you. Meanwhile, let's see what the Warriors are doing. Golden State's at well, I'm not going to give you the score for all those that are at home and they're watching or they're DVRing it because it's not really important right now. So let's see. So we have this thing that booted up. Should be okay. However, it didn't come up. LineSnake, let's see. Yeah, we don't have any memory. Huh. Very strange that this would work now. Or would not work now. Nonetheless, what I can do is actually put the demo of this in a separate video. I apologize. Obviously, there's some technical issues here. But, the first thing you do if you do have these kind of issues is you go back and you check your code. One of the things I do is since everything was good here, I'm going to stop this one just so that we're not killing ourselves waiting for it. And I do have my other one that I made previously today, and that one was working. So I'm not. If this doesn't work, then I know it's another issue with something else, because essentially it is the same code. In fact, let me bring that over here so you can see. The only difference being is that I used a view controller earlier, but it wasn't really the proper way to do this if we were going to build this for prime time. And so that's why in our demo that we did tonight, I did it using a table view. So we're going to just kind of take a look at this once it comes up. But everything else should be the same. Maybe. Maybe not. Well, nonetheless, that's all the time we have for tonight, folks. I want to thank you guys for watching, for tuning in, for being great. These are the things that happen when you write software. Obviously, I'm not getting any blatant errors here, so I know that it's not quite an issue with the code. And so we're going to look into that. Maybe that will be the topic of our next discussion that we have next week. If not, we're going to do something cool anyway. But I urge you guys to tune in again next week. And maybe if I turn on the light, you can see me. All right, so I'm back here. I am not finished yet, but I am in just one moment. So that was my wife. It's obviously time to do family time. So that's it for tonight, and thank you guys for watching Curtis Code. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you. And now you're going to watch me fumble around until I stop the live stream. But thank you guys so much, and please have your questions